A girl left home to visit a friend but never made it. At first, police couldn't find a single clue, and the case went cold. For years, it felt like the answer was right in front of them, but no one could put the pieces together. Decades passed until one day, everything changed, and the truth came out in a way no one expected. Melissa Richardson was born on January 14, 1977, in a small American town called Millbrook, Pennsylvania. She was an only child and went to a private all-girls academy, where she had a lot of friends. Even as a kid, Melissa was focused and determined. She dreamed of becoming one of the first female firefighters in the county. In high school, she even volunteered at charity events organized by the local fire department, helping out however she could. Still, she wanted to get a college degree before going into that line of work. In January of 1993, when she was 16, Melissa was in the middle of her final exams and thinking about her future education. On January 18th, just 4 days after her birthday, Melissa headed out to a friend's house. They planned to talk about college options and figure out where they might want to apply. She left home around 6 p.m., telling her mom she'd be back in about an hour and a half. But when that time came and went, there was no sign of Melissa. At first, her mom thought she probably just lost track of time, maybe stayed a bit longer at her friend's place. But when the clock passed 8 p.m., she started to get worried. She called the friend's house only to find out Melissa had never shown up. Thinking maybe plans had changed, she started calling a few of Melissa's other friends, but no one had seen her that night. A few minutes later, Melissa's mom stepped outside and ran into a neighbor. He mentioned that something had happened a few miles away. There were ambulances and a bunch of police cars at the scene. Melissa's mom was really starting to worry, so she went straight to the local police station to report her daughter missing. She gave them a full description, but instead of taking her report, the officers told her to go home. They said there'd been some kind of incident and that someone would come by to explain everything soon. A little while later, police showed up at her door and gave her the news no parent ever wants to hear. Her daughter had been found dead just hours earlier. Earlier that evening, two men had been driving down a road that connected a few nearby towns. As they passed by some houses, they noticed a girl kneeling on the roadside and pulled over to check on her. The moment they got a closer look, they knew something was seriously wrong. She was struggling to breathe and looked totally out of it. One of them ran to a nearby diner to call for help, while the other stayed with her. At first, he thought maybe she'd been hit by a car since she was so close to the road. He tried to comfort her, but her condition quickly got worse. Within minutes, she stopped breathing altogether, and by the time paramedics arrived, it was already too late. Her body was taken to the medical examiner, and the results were brutal. She had been stabbed 9 times, likely with a large knife, but there were no signs of sexual assault. Meanwhile, police began examining the scene and quickly figured out where the attack had happened. Melissa was likely ambushed in a narrow alleyway that ran off the main road leading toward her friend's house. Based on the wounds, they believed the killer came at her from behind, but beyond that, there wasn't much to go on. The alley was quiet, dark, and empty. No security cameras nearby, no witnesses, no useful evidence. Still, there was one thing that stood out. According to the medical examiner, the murder weapon wasn't just any knife. It was unusually large, too big to be something someone would just carry around in their pocket. Detectives believed the killer had brought it from home instead, already planning to use it on someone. News of the murder spread quickly through Melissa's town and nearby communities. That evening, some students were still at school for exam prep sessions, and they heard about the incident on the radio. At first, no one knew the victim's name, but it didn't take long before word got out. With no solid leads, police turned to the public for help. A few people came forward saying they'd seen a man in a light-colored coat near the road around 7 p.m. Another witness claimed they saw a man with dark curly hair walking out of the alleyway, but no one could identify either of them, even though it was a small community where most people knew each other. Based on the nature of the attack, detectives considered the possibility that the killer might have known Melissa and had a personal motive. But there was also a more disturbing theory. This might not have been a one-off. They feared they could be dealing with a serial offender. In December 1988, 4 years before Melissa's murder, a 27-year-old woman was attacked by an unknown man while walking home from work. Armed with a gun and a knife, he kidnapped her and drove out of town where he tried to assault her. Then he stabbed her 5 times and left her there, apparently thinking she was dead. But somehow she survived. Despite her injuries and the freezing cold, she managed to crawl to a nearby road where she was eventually found by a group of workers. She spent 9 days in intensive care, and doctors were able to save her life. But police were never able to track down the man who did it. And now, after Melissa's murder, both detectives and locals began to wonder, what if the same person was behind both attacks? A few days later, Melissa's funeral was held and hundreds of people from the community showed up. Just before that, her parents spoke with reporters and shared that they believed the killer might visit the ceremony. Detectives thought the same thing, so they attended the service and quietly took note of every single person who showed up. But even that didn't bring them any closer to finding the person responsible. In the weeks that followed, police kept questioning locals and chasing down leads, but nothing panned out. More than 2 years went by, and it started to seem like the case would never be solved. People slowly stopped talking about what happened to Melissa until one day everything changed. On October 17, 1995, a local woman was walking home from work when she was attacked by a man just a few hundred yards from where Melissa had been stabbed. The attacker hit her with a knife, and when she fell and screamed, he just took off running. Despite her injuries, the woman survived. But once again, detectives hit a dead end. Since the attacker came from behind, she hadn't seen his face or noticed any clear features. Still, this time, police caught a break. A witness came forward and said they'd seen a white Ford nearby with some pretty noticeable modifications. That detail helped investigators quickly track down the owner of the car, a local milkman named Derek Mitchell. Police realized they'd spoken to Derek before, right after Melissa's murder. Back then, he'd called them to report seeing a man with dark hair near the crime scene. But a few weeks later, when detectives followed up with him in person, Derek's story had changed slightly. At first, he claimed he'd been driving down that road around 6:30 p.m. Now, he insisted it was closer to 5:30. Still, he had an alibi. His mother told police they'd been driving together and were already home at the time Melissa was attacked. But now, there was more reason to be suspicious. Derek drove the same white Ford witnesses had seen near another attack, and he was known for always wearing a light-colored trench coat, just like the one several witnesses described seeing near both crime scenes. He also had light-colored hair, and 2 different people had reported seeing a fair-haired man near the alley where Melissa was murdered. That was enough for detectives to seriously start considering him as a suspect and to get a warrant to search his home. Inside the house, police found a large knife that matched the wounds on the most recent victim. But that was just the beginning. During the search, they also uncovered a hidden journal, and what was written inside left everyone stunned. In the diary, Derek admitted that he was the one who attacked the woman back in 1988. He called it his masterpiece and even rated the crime, giving it a 95% success rate. When he later found out the victim had survived, he wrote that next time he'd do better. He also wrote about trying to sneak into a nursing home to kill someone, but said the plan didn't work out. Even more disturbing, he mentioned that some of his friends used to jokingly call him a killer after that first attack because of how obsessed he was with knives. He also said he threatened his first victim, warning her that if she gave his description to the police, he'd hurt someone else. On top of that, Derek confessed to the 1995 stabbing. He wrote that he'd gotten angry with his girlfriend that day, convinced she was cheating on him. Fueled by rage, he drove around looking for someone to take it out on. First, he saw a man, but decided that was too risky. Then, he spotted a woman walking alone, stopped the car, and attacked her. He said he felt a wave of relief afterward, and didn't care at all whether the woman lived or died. The diary also detailed his plans to commit more murders, and even mentioned that he had broken into the homes of several women he knew while they were away. When police searched Derek's car, they found blood-stained clothes and a torn piece of a tie, which, as it turned out, he'd used in an attempt to strangle his first victim. That alone was more than enough to charge him in the attacks on both women. Detectives were also pretty sure he was behind Melissa's murder too, and they started digging for a possible connection. It didn't take long to find one. Derek's family knew Melissa's. They both spent time at the same local community center where residents would hang out and socialize. In fact, Melissa had celebrated her birthday there just 4 days before she died, and Derek had been at that venue that same night. Investigators also confirmed that he showed up at her funeral. Still, they didn't have a single piece of solid evidence linking him to her murder. While Derek sat behind bars, detectives questioned him, but he denied everything. He did, however, offer up a theory. According to him, the killer might have been a guy who used to play pool with Melissa at the community center. Derek said the guy left town shortly after the murder, and that the last time he saw him was at Melissa's funeral. Police tracked the man down, but he didn't match any of the witness descriptions of the person seen near the crime scene. Derek, on the other hand, was a perfect match, but they still didn't have enough to make it stick. In the end, Derek was only charged in connection with the two attacks from 1988 and 1995. In December 1996, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 3 life terms with the possibility of parole after just 15 years. But investigators weren't ready to let go. They kept looking for anything that could help them finally get justice for Melissa. Out of all the potential suspects, Derek still made the most sense. But there were 2 major problems: a lack of physical evidence and his alibi. As you might remember, his mother had told police that she and Derek were out delivering flyers and were already home by the time Melissa was killed. But here's the thing. Derek himself had called police the day after the murder and claimed to have seen a man with dark hair near the scene about an hour later. That call actually contradicted his own alibi. Based on what he told them, he would have had to have been right near the alley when Melissa was attacked. That got detectives thinking. Was his mom lying to protect him? After all, she wasn't just any mom. She was a former political party advisor just like her husband, and she also happened to be the town's sitting mayor. When police confronted the parents again, they stuck to their story, insisting their son had nothing to do with the murder. Still, detectives kept digging, and eventually they uncovered the truth. Derek's alibi was completely made up. They found solid proof that his mother wasn't with him that evening, which meant she'd lied to protect her son. But that wasn't the only discovery. Investigators also learned something else, something just as disturbing. Turns out Derek's father had gotten rid of a knife his son brought home after the 1995 attack. He admitted to boiling it in water, taking it apart, and disposing of the pieces just hours before police arrived with a search warrant. For that, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison. As for Derek's mother, her involvement didn't end there. Later on, she gave an interview to a local TV station and claimed it was actually her idea for her husband to get rid of the knife. She said she truly believed her son was innocent and was scared the police would try to pin someone else's crime on him. But even with everything they'd uncovered, police still didn't have enough evidence to charge Derek with Melissa's murder. While he was serving time for the other attacks, detectives kept digging into his past, trying to find anything that could finally tie him to the crime. But nothing ever came of it. The only new discovery came during a routine search of his prison cell. Officers found several disturbing notes, filled with twisted and graphic fantasies about women he knew. Just like the pages from his old diary, they painted a deeply unsettling picture of his mindset. With no solid leads in Melissa's case, investigators also looked at other potential suspects. One was a local man who had killed his own mother in 1994. After the murder, he left behind a note saying she had started to suspect him of being the one who murdered Melissa. Another suspect was serial killer Robert Kessler. He was convicted of killing 3 people, but detectives couldn't find any concrete link between him and Melissa's case. From that point on, the investigation basically came to a standstill. Melissa's parents were convinced Derek was the killer, and the fact that police still couldn't charge him for her murder weighed heavily on them. In 2008, Melissa's mother passed away from cancer, and in 2012, her father died as well. Neither of them lived to see justice for their daughter. Then in 2013, the case drew public attention once again when detectives made a renewed push to bring the killer to justice. They put out another appeal to the public asking for any information, and even the governor voiced support for their efforts. The tips that came in didn't lead anywhere until one of Derek's former cellmates came forward with a story that completely changed the direction of the case. He claimed that one day Derek had bragged about attacking a girl. According to him, Derek said he saw her at a crosswalk, and something in him just snapped. That detail instantly stood out to detectives since Melissa had been using a crosswalk that led straight into the alley where she was attacked. The other two victims, on the other hand, had been found nowhere near crosswalks. That one clue strongly suggested Derek had been talking about Melissa, or possibly another victim that police hadn't discovered. Still, detectives doubted there were any other victims because no other similar unsolved cases had been reported in the area. After speaking with Derek's former cellmate, police secured another warrant and returned to his house, hoping to finally uncover new evidence. As expected, they didn't find anything major, but something still caught their attention: a newspaper clipping about Melissa's murder, published a year after she was killed. It wasn't enough to prove guilt, but detectives decided it was time to put everything they had on the table and try to take the case to trial. By then, a new law had also come into effect in Pennsylvania. It allowed prosecutors to bring up a suspect's prior convictions in court, which could be a game changer for Melissa's case. Derek was already serving time for 2 violent attacks, both strikingly similar to what happened to Melissa, and committed just miles from where she was killed. Now, on top of that, investigators had testimony from his former cellmate and solid proof that Derek's alibi had been faked. That was finally enough for prosecutors to move forward. On February 12, 2014, detectives announced that Derek had been officially charged with Melissa's murder. The timing was no coincidence. It happened on the very same day his first parole hearing was scheduled. Instead of walking free, he stayed behind bars, and prosecutors began preparing for trial. It took nearly a year for the case to go to court. Derek pleaded not guilty, but by then he had already admitted to attacking 2 other women, and this time he revealed even more disturbing details. He said he started sneaking out of the house at night when he was around 19 or 20. He'd take a knife with him and wander the streets, hoping to run into someone he could kill. According to Derek, it was all about feeling powerful, feeling like he had control over someone else because he didn't want to be seen as weak. His ex-girlfriend also testified, saying Derek started acting really strange right after Melissa was murdered. At the time, she just figured he was shaken up like everyone else in town. But looking back, she realized there was more to it. When Derek was asked how he felt about women in general, he said he both loved and hated them. He admitted he struggled with low self-esteem and constantly felt worthless, which made it hard for him to trust anyone, especially women. He also revealed that he kept a collection of 20 to 30 knives at home, along with a crossbow and a few air rifles, and apparently his parents were well aware of it. Derek even admitted that he never left the house without a knife. But when it was time for his former cellmate to testify, the prosecution hit an unexpected snag. The man said he couldn't clearly remember what Derek had told him, and admitted he might have been confusing the conversation with someone else. Still, he did share one strange detail. He and the other inmates used to joke about how Derek had stabbed his victims multiple times, but somehow missed all their vital organs. It became a running joke, especially when they played darts. The trial also took a sudden, heartbreaking turn when Melissa's cousin suffered a heart attack during one of the sessions and had to be rushed to the hospital. Later on, the prosecution called a former mayor to the stand, and he shared something interesting about Derek's mother. At the time, she was a local councilwoman, and because of her position, she managed to attend a closed police briefing. There, she repeatedly pressed detectives for information about a car scene near the crime scene and demanded to know every detail. Considering she also helped her son fake an alibi, the whole thing came off as deeply suspicious. The trial lasted 5 weeks, and in December 2014, the jury reached a verdict. Derek was found guilty of murdering Melissa Richardson. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 21 years. When the verdict was read, Derek showed no emotion. He later appealed the decision, but the court rejected it, saying the evidence against him was overwhelming. So, after 26 long years, justice was finally served. In Melissa's memory, local officials named a road after her and later even renamed a street using her last name. In 2022, a new community center opened its doors, proudly bearing Melissa Richardson's name. The case serves as a reminder of how determination, evolving forensic techniques, and changing laws can eventually bring justice, even in the coldest of cases. Though Melissa's parents never lived to see their daughter's killer convicted, their unwavering belief that Derek Mitchell was responsible ultimately proved correct. The investigation revealed not only the depths of one man's depravity, but also the lengths to which his family would go to protect him, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. The fake alibi, the destroyed evidence, and the abuse of political position all painted a picture of a family conspiracy that nearly allowed a killer to escape justice permanently. Today, Derek Mitchell remains behind bars, and the community of Millbrook, Pennsylvania continues to honor the memory of a young woman whose life was cut tragically short just as she was beginning to chase her dreams of becoming a firefighter. Her story stands as a testament to the persistence of those who refuse to let injustice prevail, no matter how many years may pass.